Well, hello, and welcome to the PJH Writing Command Center for another podcast episode of God Bless the King Publishing LLC's podcast. I'm chuckling a little bit because I totally blew the introduction just on the first take of this. And I usually do these in one take. I don't have many times that I have hiccups, but I just completely lost it. So, oh my gosh, that was hysterical. But I'm here by myself, despite the laughter. Oh, no, here's some people coming in now. So they didn't witness my my blooper. I should do a video on this. But anyway, I am Paul John Hausleben of God Bless the King Publishing LLC, and I am the flagship author. I'm your supposed host for this podcast. I am the chief photographer, chief cook, bottle washer, music reviewer, and music critic, and this is a music podcast episode. Yeah, it is. Okay. And do everything guy at God Bless the King Publishing LLC. But before we get started, and before I do another blooper, let's get our little Orphan Annie decoder pins out and a word from our proud sponsor. And we are proudly sponsored today by Corporate Facilities Group Incorporated, the leader in technical consulting, facility maintenance management, property services, maintenance and management throughout America, and now CFG Incorporated is proud to announce their new department and new services with pre-construction services for your residential renovations, your residential projects, your residential developments, and light commercial projects. Headed up by the amazing Steve McMillan at CFG Incorporated. Let's give it up for Steve. And they are excited, and we're excited for them. Check them out on the web at www.corporatefacilitiesgroupfigure1.com. That is www.corporatefacilitiesgroup1.com. Check them out. And once more, we thank Lydia, Liliana, and Steve at CFG Incorporated for sponsoring the podcast. So today, we would like to talk, and this comes as a suggestion from a number of folks who enjoyed or didn't enjoy my overrated bands podcast of a few months ago or so, where I listed, and surprisingly this time around, I didn't get blasted quite as hard as I did when I wrote the article on my blog years ago. And I did my ratings of the 5 most overrated bands. I didn't get blasted too bad this time. I got blasted really bad by one person. And they took great offense to my my number 2 most overrated. And they really let me have it. But other than that, I kind of think if I did the analysis, it was maybe 75% agreed and 25% disagreed. Maybe not with all my selections, but disagreed with a majority of my selections. So it was fairly encouraging. I didn't get, you get these controversial things, and this is all subjective and maybe a little objective, but it's all just opinion, and that makes it fun. That's what makes discussing sports fun, or rating the best baseball player or the best goalie in hockey or whatever. It's just fun, and it invokes discussion and your own opinions, and some people get a little emotional about it. So today we had a suggestion. Paulie, you did the overrated. What about the most underrated? All right, we can do that. That's a great one. Okay, and it's a little less emotional than the overrated is. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to open up the Paulie archives and dial up my musical mind here. And I did make some notes. I do most of this ad-libbed. I sometimes make a little notes to reference to keep me on track. But most of it I just do from my memory. So we have, as we always do in our ratings and always have, I always go 5-1. So in this case, 5 will be quite underrated. And then number 1 is unbelievably underrated. So that's how it's going to work. And we do have some honorable mentions, folks that maybe don't make it into the top 5, but certainly in my opinion, are an underrated band. And that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with our honorable mentions. And in this case, this band, Badfinger, a band that was on Apple Records and had really close ties to the Beatles. They're on Apple, so obviously there's a connection there, and also some sharing of music and with McCartney, with Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney. I believe he wrote one or two songs for him, and they put it on records and such. But even their sound, and it might have been the Apple mystique or whatever, but even their sound really sounded like the Beatles. And I'm not, as many people who know me well and maybe listen to some of the other podcasts or read my blogs years ago, I'm not a Beatles fan. I'm absolutely not a Beatles fan. And for me to say that a band like Badfinger that sounded sort of Beatles-like makes the on mention as an underrated band might be a surprise. But other people who know me always laugh because I'm a huge ELO fan, Electric Light Orchestra. I think Jeff Lynne's just the most amazing musical genius. And if I do an underrated single artist, he's probably going to be right at the top if I ever do that rating. And people laugh at me because you don't like the Beatles, but you love ELO. And a lot of people say Jeff Lynne was like the fifth or sixth Beatle in there, and that might be true. And even John Lennon said ELO is what we would have sounded like if we had stayed together. So I'm a fervent ELO fan, but I'm not a Beatles fan. So Badfinger, in my opinion, about 14 million records they sold, and great songwriters, great melodies. Pete Ham was the leader. Tom Evans also wrote a lot of music with Ham, and there was just so much tragedy. Apple label went belly up, but there's just so much tragedy, mismanagement of funds, and they lost their money, and evil conniving stuff going on, and tragedy with suicides and just awful stuff associated with a very, very talented musical band. And they were from Wales in the UK, wrote a big giant hit, Ham and Evans, Without You, which became a amazing single for Harry Nilsson years ago, and then was redone by Mariah Carey for another hit a few years back. Great song, powerful, emotional power ballad, just a really great song. But one of the albums that they did that I'm particularly fond of was, I think it's Straight Up. And great Baby Blue, Day After Day, of course, Without You. Just a lot of good music, a lot of great melodies, good songwriters, really good musicians. Badfinger makes the underrated on mention. The other on mention that is underrated, in my opinion, is the Moody Blues. Now, the Moody Blues have put out a lot of records. My goodness gracious, the Moody Blues. Tremendous amount of recordings. And but sometimes you're just hard-pressed to remember them all, because you get stuck on the nights in white satin and maybe the Tuesday afternoon or something more familiar. But when you dive deep into their collections, it's extensive, and it goes from the early days when they didn't have that symphonic prog sound, and then they kind of evolved into the Moody Blues sound, and just a great band that isn't a rock and roll Hall of Fame, but a lot of people, when they're talking about prog rock or you're talking about symphonic, Yes is always mentioned, and the Moody Blues wrote some fantastic melodies, and great lead singer, used the flute with Mr. Thomas on the flute, and he wrote some great tunes too. And you get distracted by the pomp and circumstance of the Moody Blues. They were bringing orchestras and all this drama and everything, but really a great band. And no, I'm not going to pick up their albums and listen to it from track one to the end all the time. But if you pick up the greatest hits and you listen to the heart of the music of the Moody Blues, it is a great band, and they've sold an awful lot of records. And I don't think they get the recognition, particularly in the prog rock circles. It's ELP and Genesis before they went poppy, and of course, yes, Jethro Tull. You hear all these proggers, but you don't necessarily get the Moody Blues mentioned in there too often. So, at any rate, there's my on mentions. I've got Badfinger and I've got the Moody Blues. Okay, so now we'll get to the heart of the matter. And number 5 is Marshall Tucker Band. Now, if you go back and look at the I guess it's the late 70s, maybe to the early 80s, there was this whole Southern country rock thing going on. And it kind of started with the Charlie Daniels band. Charlie Daniels being a studio musician out of Nashville that played the fiddle. And he had been around for years. If you needed a fiddle player, Charlie Daniels was your guy to play on your record. And then he had this song, The Devil Went Down to Georgia. And all of a sudden, everybody's walking around with cowboy hats and boots. And it's all over the radio. And now everybody's got country rock, rockabilly, whatever you want to call it, Southern rock playing. And my buddy Harry, if you read the Adventures of Harry and Paul, his family went through this whole stage where they were all into the country music and the Southern rock, and I got sucked into it too. And Harry and I were taking our dates and our young ladies' friends at the times to all kinds of these concerts and saw most of the bands. Charlie Daniels Band put on quite a show, and the Allman Brothers I would put in that category. The Outlaws were another one. Lynyrd Skynyrd, maybe. There were a number of them. But in my opinion, the Marshall Tucker Band was the best of the bunch, and they just didn't get the recognition they deserved. These guys were knockout live performers. And the heart of the band, Toy Caldwell was the lead guitarist. His brother Tommy Caldwell. A lot of tragedy with this band too. Tommy Caldwell was killed in, I think, a motorcycle accident. Doug Gray was the lead vocalist, a big giant guy with a set of pipes with like Meatloaf, would blow you right out of your chair. George McCorkle was the rhythm guitarist, the drummer Paul Riddle, and maybe that's why I go to this band, because they're so underrated on their musicianship. They had Jerry Eubanks, who played flute, saxophone, some of the other horn instruments. So the horn section and the flute section added just an element of mystique and difference to the Marshall Tucker Band. But their debut album is one of the greatest debut albums. And you don't really have to be a Southern rock or a blues rock, however you want to describe them, fan to appreciate their debut album. Has Can't You See? Great long single. And the flute is a primary instrument on that single. And Toy Caldwell is a great guitar player that nobody ever mentions as far as great guitar players. And when you used to see his live concerts, he was off the chain. And he's a non-pick guy. And I tend to gravitate, I'm a Mark Knopfler guy. I tend to gravitate towards those guitar players that play with just their fingers. And Toy Caldwell was a thumb guy. And this guy could play the heck out of a electric guitar. But that debut album alone is one of the best debut albums I've ever listened to. And for that, and the fact that the Outlaws and the Allmans and the Charlie Daniels Band got all the credit and elevated over the Marshall Tucker Band, I'm putting them in number 5 as my number 5 most underrated band, the Marshall Tucker Band. Check them out. Number 4 is Grand Funk Railroad. And in the 1970s, you had this arena rock thing going on. And, oh my gosh, Grand Funk was sort of like in the arena rock, what Rush was to prog rock. Yeah, three guys. Oh my gosh, I got to do this from memory. Mel Shacker, Mark Mark Farner, and Don Brewer, and three guys who sounded like there were 100 musicians on the stage. They were just they dominated arena rock for quite a period of time in there. In fact, because I'm kind of anti-Beatles, it took Grand Funk Railroad to sell out Shea Stadium only 72 hours. And everybody talks about the Beatles and, of course, that famous concert where they sold out Shea and everybody screaming their brains out. But it took the Beatles weeks to sell out Shea Stadium. It only took Grand Funk 72 hours from announcement of the tickets till it was sold out. That's how huge they were at the time. And the album Closer to Home, I'm your with the slash I'm Your Captain single is a long musical track, and it's kind of got like two parts to it. And I'd almost say it borders on a little prog. There's a little string section in there and a powerful bass played by Mel. A great song, a classic song. In fact, that whole album is fantastic. It's a fantastic album. And Grand Funk does not get enough credit for the power force they were. Great songwriters, great musicians, and dominating arena rock at the time. So number 4 on our list is Grand Funk. At number 3, and I flirted with back and forth with a couple folks, and it's the Kinks. The Kinks are a hugely underrated band. They have this whole thing because they would argue on stage and get into the turmoil, and there was all kinds of chaos, and they had an American tour that went south, and they ended up getting banned and not able to play in America when the British invasion was coming. And you can look all this up. And they were huge in the UK and huge overseas. And then they came here and started getting a following. And then the Beatles were in there, and all the other British invasion started. And the Kinks kind of just fell to the wayside. But what a great band. Great songwriting by Davies, well, two brothers, Ray, right? It's Ray Davies, yeah. Sold 50 million records. The Kinks have sold 50 million records, but they pioneered so much of a sound. The guitar distortion, You Really Got Me, which is just one of those songs that just sticks in your head. It's like ELO, I can't get it out of my head. Well, you can't get that You Really Got Me out of your head either. And Death of a Clown, they had that kind of, I guess, a theme record with the Village Green Preservation Society. So it was a theatrical theme concept album, which really didn't. It's a great record. It just didn't get the following, say, that Thick as a Brick or a Sergeant Pepper would have gotten. But the Kinks wrote great melodies, great songs, and in my opinion, just don't get enough credit for the pioneers that they were, and they got lost in the shuffle. So number 3 is the Kinks. Number 2 is near and dear to my heart, and I mentioned the flute. I always gravitate towards flutes. I love it in rock and roll, and Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull makes number 2 on my list, and I just find it hard to believe that Jethro Tull is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Chubby Checker is. Now, nothing against old Chubster. He seemed like a nice guy. Let's Twist and Shout is a lot of fun, and everybody can wiggle their tuchus around and have a good old time. Yeah, it's great. I love Chubby Checker. But really, Chubby Checker is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Jethro Tull is not. I just don't understand. I don't understand a lot of things about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that's one that is just mind-boggling to me. And nothing against Chubby. Oh, he's great. I love it. But he's got like 4 songs. And 2 of them I'm not ever going to listen to. So Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson is one of the most highly intelligent, brilliant people you can ever imagine. I just would love to sit and talk to Ian Anderson for an hour or two. I think the guy's just magical. I love his old time interviews. Came on one of the American late night talk show hosts, be it Dick Cavett or I don't know, maybe it was Johnny Carson. And he wears his kilt and his Scottish stuff because he was born in Scotland. And he's got his big Sherlock Holmes pipe and his hat on, and he's got all the hair and the beard at the time. What a front man. What a showman. What a fantastic showman. Their concerts are just amazing. And Ian's got a little bit of an ego, and he should, because he is a brilliant guy. And I heard an interview of him saying, we pioneered, I knew I wouldn't be as great a guitar player as I should have been. And he is a very good guitar player. He kind of downplays that. So he picked up the flute as an instrument and learned it. And he claims that pioneered that. But there are a lot of other bands. I mentioned Marshall Tucker Band. I mentioned the Moody Blues. How about Traffic? And then there was the band from the Netherlands, very underrated band too, Focus. And they would have made my on mention, except that they just don't have enough recordings. But Jan Ackerman on guitar is one of the most underrated guitarists ever. But no, Ian, I love you to death, but there were other bands with the flute. But when you think of the flute in rock, be it in prog rock, you kind of think of Tull. And Jethro Tull music is complex. Jethro Tull music is difficult. It's time signature changes and all kinds of strange stuff going on. Sure, Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, Passion Play, and then the folk prog era where he had Minstrel in the Gallery, Heavy Horses, Stormwatch, some of those albums in there. This is amazing music. And yeah, there's a couple bombs like Under Wraps and the A album. I don't quite get that. But I was lucky enough to see the classic concert live of Tull at Madison Square Garden. I can't remember the year, but it'll make me sound old. And, well, I guess I am old. But what a concert. These guys were amazing. And Martin Barr, another underrated guitarist. So I got to do my underrated guitarist podcast. Every musician that Tull brought in and played are amazing musicians. I mean, John Glasscock on bass was fabulous. John Bonham, the drummer for Led Zeppelin. Everybody always puts a John Bonham, greatest drummer, blah, blah, blah. John Bonham said, I am not the best drummer ever to come out of England. Those are his words. He said, Barrymore Barlow at Jethro Tull. That's the best English drummer ever. And he said, I could never play Tull music. It's just so difficult. Barlow's drum solo on the Bursting Out live album is a thing of amazing technical ability. But it's every musician, be it Ian, be it the Jeffrey Hammond, all the bass players they brought in the years, Clyde Bunker on drums before Barlow, and then everybody afterwards. Martin Barr is just a huge part, that guitar solo in Aqualung and Locomotive Breath. So once more, it's about 70 million, 80 million records sold, but just a prolific output, a great songwriter, and great musicians. How on earth are they not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Even if they just put out Aqualung and Thick as a Brick, that would be worthy of it. And maybe Minstrel in the Gallery. Amazing band. I love Jethro Tull. They're up there in my favorite bands. Obviously, I have a great affection for them, as I do the number one most underrated band on my list. And I just, once more, nothing against old Chubster, but my gosh, put Jethro Tull in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, please. And number one, most underrated is Dire Straits. How on earth you can talk about rock and roll, particularly in the 80s, and if you want to classify them as pub rock or whatever, um, it's hard to believe the achievements of Dire Straits and the fact that the great Mark Knopfler disbanded the band when they were at the height of their popularity. They estimate about 130 million records sold. And that's only with 6 studio albums. They only had 6 studio albums. And of course, Brothers in Arms, a large majority of that sale. But I think the 3 or 4 classic albums that they put out, and the fact that you couldn't turn on MTV. I think Dire Straits made MTV what it was with the classic songs they had. They had the beautiful Roller Girl video with Skate Away, the Making Movies album with Tunnel of Love on there, Romeo and Juliet. What a record. My favorite record by Dire Straits is Love Over Gold. And I argued for years when I wrote my blogs that Telegraph Road is one of the greatest prog rock songs of all time. And people laughed at me. They're like, that's not prog rock. That's just rock and roll or whatever, arena rock, pub rock, whatever you want to classify Straits as. And I was like, no, that's a progressive rock song. And sure enough, years later, I've been exonerated because if you go and Google it, it'll come up under prog rock. Love Over Gold is my favorite Dire Straits record. But of course, the debut album is amazing, with the Sultans of Swing on there. And I love Communique. I love everything they've done. And they just get lost in the shuffle once more. And what a great collection. Just a fabulous collections of musicians. Pick Withers on drums and Mark Knopfler's brother David and John Isley on bass, and then you had Alan Clark on keyboards, and later on Terry Williams, a Welsh drummer with a varied background, came into Straits, as did a number of other players. Hal Linz was an American rhythm guitarist that came into the band. But the Alchemy tour, the Alchemy recordings of their live tour was Dire Straits at the height of their musicianship. You can check out those videos on YouTube, and they will be your jaw hang open. And I was lucky enough to see Straits one time in concert. Missed the Alchemy tour, though. And that's one of the great regrets of my musical concert attendance, that I missed that. But if you look at those YouTube videos, Terry Williams on drums is just out of his... he's just in another world. And of course, Knopfler being, in my opinion, the best guitarist of all time, is the show stealer. But Terry Williams steals the spotlight from Mark a number of times. The Alchemy tour is just a thing of beauty, but they talk about live performances, and you just never hear about the Alchemy tour. Bruce Springsteen, I've seen Springsteen live, he's great. And The Who and Led Zeppelin, all these classic bands live, and Straits is never mentioned up there with the greatest live concerts of all time. Check out those videos. Alchemy. This is a band at the height of their powers, at the height of perfect musicianship, teamwork, timing. It's just absolutely remarkable. And I talked about Ian Anderson being a great showman, and he certainly was, with all his exotic outfits and his antics and his eyeballs and playing the flute. Knopfler had a quiet, subtle way of being a great showman. He didn't have the flamboyant. He almost looks at times like he's bored playing the guitar. It comes so easy to him. It's just amazing to me that people don't talk about Dire Straits as much as they should when they talk about rock and roll history. So there you go. They are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it took a long time, in my opinion, for them to go in. I mean, my gosh, 130 million records sold with 6. And Mark Knopfler getting tired of it and said it was too much and too stressful, and they disbanded, then got back and did the last record there on Every Street, and just never mentioned. And that's a crime. So that's my most underrated band of all time, Dire Straits. So there we go. There's Paulie's list, 5-1 with the honorable mentions, and you probably have your own opinions and you have your own bands that you feel are overlooked. And we'll do underrated single artists, and we'll also do overrated single artists one of these days. Stir up some more of those emotions. But thank you for tuning into the podcast. Appreciate all the support and feedback. You can email us at godblesthekegpublishing@gmail.com. There's also an ability to send an email through the website for the podcast episode on that, if you choose to send us some feedback, and we read them all. Thank you so much. Hey, be kind, be tolerant, be gentle. Be appreciative of other people. Kindness is for free. It's cheap. We need to share it more often. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.